None of them knew that behind that door awaited pure hell. Not a single scout reported the trap. But once it began, there was no way out. Tens of minutes felt like an eternity. Smoke-soaked walls, the screams of the wounded, the crackling of rifles, explosions, and that one grenade thrown from beneath a pile of bodies.
This isn't a movie.
This is reality. November the 13th, 2004. The house that would later be called the House of Hell. But right then, it was just a building, one the Marines had entered, thinking it was another enemy stronghold to clear. But it was a trap, carefully planned down to the smallest detail. Some of them would come out bleeding, some wouldn't come out at all. But they would all come out,
because that's the rule, we don't leave our own. Never.
Autumn 2004.
Iraq.
The city of Fallujah. Operation Phantom Fury, one of the largest and most brutal operations carried out by the United States Marine Corps in the 21st century. The objective to clear the city of radical fighters. Fallujah had become a fortress. Mines, snipers, reinforced buildings, booby-trapped streets. Every structure meant potential death. But the order was clear. Clear it. Block by block, house by house. And so into one of these houses walked a squad from the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines.
A 2-story house.
From the outside, an ordinary building, nothing unusual. But this house would soon become legend. When the Marines stepped inside, everything seemed nearly calm. The first floor, clear. A few rooms, dust, leftover furniture, signs of life. Nothing unusual. But as soon as they moved to the 2nd floor, something happened that no one could have predicted. In an instant, the entire space exploded in screams, gunfire, and a hail of bullets from 3 directions. From every wall, every door, heavily armed fighters burst out. Combat broke out at arm's length. The fire was so intense that Marines barely had time to duck behind walls. Wounded appeared in the first seconds. The house became a trap, a death cage. The Marines realized they were surrounded, and the enemy was well prepared. But there was nowhere to retreat. Behind them, their own. Ahead, death. The choice was simple. Fight to the end or die here. The first minutes of battle turned into chaos. Commands overlapped with screams. The sound of automatic fire merged with the dull thuds of grenades. Every step meant danger. The Marines tried to fight back, but the enemy fired from upper floors and through holes in the walls, like from gun ports. Everything had been calculated, every corner, every line of sight. The battle was close quarters, at arm's length. It no longer resembled a typical shootout, I'd say. It was a slaughter, hand-to-hand. Screams, punches, blood. One Marine, hit by shrapnel in the neck, kept firing while lying on the floor until he lost consciousness. Another, covering his buddy, blindly hurled grenades around a corner, knowing the enemy was there. At that very moment, First Sergeant Brad Castle entered the house. He already knew it was a trap. He had heard over the radio that there were wounded inside, that the situation was critical.
But he couldn't stay outside.
That would have been betrayal. Casal gathered a group and stormed in to save his men. Bullets were whizzing literally past his ears.
One of the Marines fell, hit in the leg.
Casal paused for a second, grabbed him under the arm and, along with another Marine, dragged him behind the nearest wall.
Then, an explosion.
Shrapnel fanned out, tearing through everything in its path. Casal fell, struck by several hits at once. 7 gunshot wounds, more than 40 metal fragments in his body. But he was alive, and he kept commanding. From beneath blood and dust, he gave orders, shielding the wounded Marine with his body to save his life. One of the photos taken later would be seen around the world. Bloody, holding a pistol, he sat by the wall ready to shoot until his last bullet. Meanwhile, the fight raged on. Every step toward the wounded was a feat of heroism. Every attempt to pull a comrade out was a mission under a hail of gunfire. In the narrow hallways, there was no room to maneuver. The battle was close quarters, from room to room. The enemy was well equipped and motivated. These weren't random fighters. They were trained, disciplined, knew the terrain, and had prepared their defense down to the last detail. They hid behind false walls, used smoke grenades, and detonated rooms when the Marines entered. One of them, wounded and pinned under debris, raised his hand. The Marines thought he was surrendering,
but then he opened his fingers and a grenade dropped to the floor.
The Marines managed to jump back, but the blast shook the building. When the dust settled, the squad leader moved closer, and seeing that the enemy fighter was still alive, finished him off to prevent him from causing further harm. The battle had already lasted more than 30 minutes. It seemed like the end, Ammunition was running out, the number of wounded growing, but surrender was not an option. Soon reinforcements approached the building. Another Marine squad tried to break through but came under heavy fire. One by one the men fell.
They knew their brothers were inside.
And for that, they were willing to walk through fire. From inside, fragments of phrases came over the radio. Wounded, need evacuation urgently, fire from second floor. Time was running out. The building could collapse, the enemy could call reinforcements.
All that was left was to push through.
The second Marine group didn't stop under fire. Despite losses, they kept moving, dashing forward through the smoke, taking cover behind armor and the walls of ruined buildings. They knew inside were their guys. They heard their voices on the radio, and they never even considered retreat. When they stormed the house, the hell continued. Inside was thick smoke, making it nearly impossible to distinguish shapes. The floor was covered in blood. Debris, charred bodies, spent casings underfoot. It all turned the house into a nightmarish maze. And yet, step by step, room by room, they pushed forward. One officer would later say, "We weren't walking, we were crawling. Not just physically, morally. Every few meters could cost you your life." In one of the rooms, they found Sergeant Casal. He had already been pulled at once, but he refused to leave the house until everyone had been evacuated. Despite the blood loss, he kept firing, covering the retreat of the other Marines. His body barely obeyed him anymore, but his spirit never broke. Meanwhile, other Marines were making their way up to the second floor, where the last enemy fighters had entrenched themselves. That's where true hand-to-hand combat began. Weapons jammed from dirt and dust, ammunition was running out, and the distance between opponents was so close that they had to fight with knives, rifle butts, even bare hands. One Marine, stabbed in the side with a knife, still managed to take down his opponent by striking him with his helmet. On the upper floor, the battle raged for every meter. One of the rooms was rigged with explosives. The enemy had planned to blow themselves up along with the Marines. Only a miracle and the quick reaction of one Marine who noticed wires under the floor saved the lives of his comrades. He grabbed the grenade that was about to be activated and threw it back into the room, jumping away at the last moment. When the second floor was finally cleared, it became clear the enemy had fallen. But the price was immense. In the house, one Marine was killed.
11 were seriously wounded.
Many could barely stay on their feet. At that moment, a decision was made: immediate evacuation. The house could no longer withstand the damage, walls were cracking, and the smell of blood, gunpowder, and smoke was unbearable. But carrying out the wounded under fire meant risking every step. One by one, the Marines hoisted their wounded brothers onto their shoulders and carried them outside. Under the cover of smoke, under the roar of gunfire, the Marines exited the house that would forever remain in their memory. Several times they returned fire, finishing off those who could still shoot them in the back. One Marine, gravely wounded in the abdomen, begged to be left behind so as not to slow the evacuation. The response was brief: "We'll get you out, or we die together." Those words became more than just a moral stance. They were what defined the Marines in that fight, their code, their essence. Even in hell, they don't leave their own behind. When the last wounded man was carried beyond the building's perimeter, just over 1 hour had passed since the battle began. 60 minutes are like an entire lifetime. A house that looked ordinary from the outside had become the site of one of the fiercest close-quarters battles of the entire operation. Medics worked right there on the ground, hastily setting up aid stations. Blood poured from everyone who came out of the house, but they were alive. Many thanks to those who had dared to walk through fire for their brothers. Among them was Sergeant Casal, who, even on a stretcher, never lost consciousness and kept trying to give orders until he was airlifted away by helicopter. Later, at the hospital, doctors would remove more than 40 fragments from his body. He had lost so much blood that his survival was considered a medical miracle. His photograph, taken immediately after the battle, would become a symbol. The sergeant, covered in blood, pistol in hand, half sitting against a wall with another Marine beside him providing cover.
That image would be shared by every news agency.
It would be printed in magazines, shown on television, and studied in military academies as a symbol of courage and loyalty to the brotherhood of combat. For this battle, 2 Marines were nominated for the highest military award, the Navy Cross.
One of them was none other than Casal.
The second was a Marine who shielded the wounded while others carried out the bodies. They did not think about medals. They acted as they had been taught, as honor demanded. Military analysts would later write, "In the house of hell, the Marines faced well-organized and well-trained insurgents with a pre-planned defense system. Their mission was not just to repel the assault, but to kill as many American soldiers as possible and turn that house into a trap that would be remembered forever.
They nearly succeeded. Nearly.
But they failed to consider one thing: the Marines who do not retreat, who do not surrender, who are ready to die but never abandon their own. Fallujah was not just a war for a city, it was a war for morality, for principles, for what makes a man a soldier and a soldier a hero. And in that war, the House of Hell became a symbol of everything it means to be a Marine: endurance, loyalty, sacrifice, and determination. Later, when the clearance of the city was complete, the Marines would remember this battle most of all. Not the largest,
Not the most famous.
but the most personal, because within those walls, among smoke, blood, and bricks, they passed a test of true inner strength. After the battle, the House of Hell was completely destroyed, not just physically, but as a symbol of pain, loss, and unbreakable spirit. Only rubble remained, among which fragments of ammunition, shells, soldiers' personal items, and dark stains on the walls that could never be washed away were later found. Sergeant Brad Casal survived. He underwent several of the most complex surgeries. Recovery took years, but he did not leave the service. On the contrary, he became a living legend among the Marine Corps. His story entered textbooks, lectures, and commanders' speeches to new recruits. He told them simply, "But we don't leave our own, even if it means going through hell." The photograph of him became iconic. It was called the modern version of the flag over Iwo Jima. Except this moment had no ceremony, only blood, pain, and resolve. Other participants in the battle were not forgotten either. One Marine, who sustained 3 wounds and never left his position until the fight ended, later became an instructor, teaching new soldiers how to survive in urban combat. Another, the one who threw the grenade back at the enemy and saved the platoon, declined awards and said he had simply done what anyone else would have in his place. He left the military shortly after the operation, but spent the rest of his life involved in psychological support programs for veterans. The family of the one Marine who died in that house received a letter written by the company commander. It contained only a few lines. "He did not die in vain. He saved others, and he left us as a hero." After the operation, Fallujah remained under control for a long time, but in the memory of the Marines, it would forever remain a symbol that war is not just a struggle for territory. It is a struggle for people, for those beside you, for every person who goes into battle with you, and to whom you owe everything, even if it means giving everything in return.
And the House of Hell became that very moment of truth.
Many veterans of that battle admitted years later they don't remember the exact timeline, they don't remember all the details, but they remember a comrade's gaze, the clenched teeth of the sergeant as he dragged a wounded man under fire.
They remember how one Marine screamed through the pain, "I won't make it. Leave me."
And how someone shouted back, "Screw you, we're getting out together." Those words stayed with them forever. Years have passed, but the story of the House of Hell lives on.
Not in museums and not only in movies.
It lives in the hearts of those who know the true value of brotherhood, who remember what it means to hold the line when everything around is falling apart. And it's stories like these that remind us heroes aren't the ones painted on posters. Heroes are those who go back into a burning building for their brothers, because for them there is simply no other option. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Stories like this aren't just pages from history. They are reminders of real courage, duty, and the price soldiers pay for each and every one of us. If you care about military history, subscribe to the channel. There are many more truthful, deep, and sometimes forgotten stories ahead that are worth remembering. Leave a comment, your opinion matters, and see you in the next episode.